Are you overwhelmed by what you know you want to do, or maybe even people are saying you should do in your kitchen and with your food? Do you want to know how to transition your kitchen and your eating to ancestral foods? Maybe you've tried before and failed or stopped and started multiple times. Maybe you've gotten the Nourishing Traditions cookbook and you feel so overwhelmed you don't know where to go next. Yes, we understand. In this episode, we'll make it so easy for you. We've put together a roadmap of 20 small steps that'll get you from a standard diet to a beautiful ancestral diet. And we'll detail them all. We'll tell you how we started, which was 2 different places, by the way, and give you many ideas and resources to keep you enthused and moving forward, no matter where you are in your food journey right now. You can download from the show notes the PDF that accompanies this episode, which has 20 small steps listed out. And then on page 2, you'll find a list of 20 resources that Allison and I leaned on heavily as we made the progression from our kitchens being more standard into ancestral. Join us as we dive into 20 small steps to an ancestral kitchen.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Allison. How are you?
Hi, Andrea. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you. It feels like a long time since we've recorded.
I know we took a good Christmas break, which is healthy.
Yeah,
I'm glad we did, but you and me recording is also our hangout time. So
exactly. I missed you.
I know I missed you too. As soon as I jumped on this morning, I was like, gosh, it's just been, I think we only missed one day of actually talking to each other, but maybe 2, but still,
Yeah.
you're my
It's not quite the same.
ancestral food therapist.
Oh. Have you had breakfast this morning?
No, actually I didn't, but it's funny because there's a friend I have she's from Germany. She lived in Aboriginal territory in Australia when I met her through the Literary Life group, the podcast. We're both also patrons of that show. And I'm not sure where she lives now. She might be back in Germany, but she had sent me this recipe for a Swiss bread. And
Right.
I thought I'd give it a shot last night. And the recipe made 2 loaves. So we had one with dinner, and then I'm going to have one this morning with eggs.
What's the Swiss bread?
I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Zopf. Is that Zoff? Maybe.
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah.
Probably.
I don't
would
know
have thought
anything
that's
about
off, yeah.
Swiss grammar. So she makes it with wheat and spelt combined, and the recipe gives instructions for, it's all by weight. So either what she calls fresh yeast or dried yeast. So you could use either one. So I was just making it on the spur of the moment yesterday. We used instant yeast last night just to have a loaf with dinner. It was pretty good. I can see that it would be even better with with real yeast. That'd be
With
a
proper yeast.
little sour. Yeah.
Yummy.
But that would assume that I planned more than 4 hours ahead.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's the way it falls, isn't it?
I don't mind.
Well, I've got kind of something similar linked. You think we would have planned this? It sounds like we planned
No
it, but we
way.
didn't. Because my lunch was a German dinner.
No way.
Again, sent to me by someone. So
theme.
Deb, who is one of our patrons, I was talking to her about cooking sauerkraut in dishes, having cooked sauerkraut. And she said, I've got this recipe that my friend gave me. It's a German dinner. Do you want me to send it to you? So she did. And I made that this morning for us. It's
Wow.
I played with it a little bit. I can't help that.
Of
I
course.
started off with some lardo in the pan, and then some onion, and then some sausages from our farmer, and then I put in a lot of cabbage and some cavolo nero, and that was all kind of cooking down, and then some really big spoonfuls of sauerkraut. I've just kind of resigned myself to the fact that I just have to make more sauerkraut because I
Yeah.
absolutely love it cooked in dishes.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
means that I use much more because dishes can handle more sauerkraut than you would necessarily want raw on
Oh,
the
yeah.
side of your
Oh,
plate,
100%. Yeah.
So I've just got to make more cabbage. That's the end of the story.
Hmm.
So the sauerkraut went in, and then I bought a tin of tomatoes, which I very rarely do, put those in and cooked it for, I don't know, maybe an hour and a quarter. It was absolutely delicious. Literally, the
That
depth
sounds
of the
so good.
sauerkraut, the acidity of the tomatoes, the cabbage, all the fat from the lardo, the salt that was on the lardo, the sausages. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And we've got lots of the veg left. We ate all the sausage, but we've got lots of the veg left. So I think
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm going to heat it up and probably just put some fish in it, stir
Yeah.
it round,
Oh,
and that will be our dinner tomorrow. We had it with sourdough and lard on our sourdough, as we always do, and some ale because we made a new batch of ale over Christmas period. And
yum.
so we've got 3 bottles of that we're drinking at the moment. And yeah, a little glass of ale on the side. It's
Yeah.
delicious. But yeah,
Oh,
German,
that
kind
sounds
of
nice.
German and Swiss. We're in the
Yeah.
same part of the world, both of us,
Yeah. And it was from a
in
friend
sync.
who's from Germany. So, you know,
Yeah, via a patron,
yeah.
which is nice.
Yeah. Um,
Thank you, Deb.
yeah. And speaking of patrons, I also want to say that for Christmas, I got myself, Angie Schneider is one of our patrons as well.
Mm.
And I don't know if listeners know that written a number, she done wrote some books. She's written a number of books, and 2 of them are, I think some of them are ebooks, and then there's 2 cookbooks. And I ordered them from her so I could give them to myself for Christmas. And Allison, she signed them and put little notes in them to
Oh,
me,
wow.
which was
Oh,
so
that's
sweet.
lovely.
Yeah, so that'll be kind of a treasure, to pass on. But one is all about preserving, veg and things like that. And the other
Mm.
is pressure canning. And
Okay.
pressure canning, I will especially recommend to moms with kids because you are just turning out an incredible amount of food on a daily basis when you have a lot of kids and you're trying to cook everything, from scratch and ancestrally. And being able to pressure can some beef stews and I mean, she has so many things in there I never would have thought of. Um,
Mm.
just having canned meat kind of sounds gross, but it's not at all. When you
Mm.
dump it out, it's just
Mm.
like having shredded chicken you can put in tacos
Yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
shredded beef that you can, I mean,
Just ready.
yeah, when you are coming home from jujitsu at 7:30 at night and because of whatever the crush of the last few days, you just didn't plan out meals well or something. I mean, those things come in clutch, being able to pop open a jar and just heat something on the
Mm.
fly. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I would like to hear more about Angie's books when we
yeah, yeah.
record our next Kitchen Table Chats podcast, which is for the patrons.
Mhm.
You need to tell me about the books.
I
I
will.
got 3 books. I bought myself 3 books for
Yeah,
Christmas, all
100%.
secondhand
I
and
bought
kind of
myself books.
smell really musty. And I'm really excited. I've read 2 of them completely. So 2 books out of the 3 I
Wow.
bought myself about food. I've read from start to finish,
What books did you
and
get?
I've got so much to say about them. I got 2 books on from Scotland on oats. One of them is by an oat farmer,
Oh, yeah.
and it's got lots of the sort of folklore around oats. The other one is called the Scots Kitchen, and it's
Oh my
just got
gosh.
so many Scottish recipes in and so many footnotes and stories and folklore, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. And then I bought also a secondhand copy of I don't know if you pronounce it Tamar Adler's
Mhm.
The Everlasting Dish, I think it's called. I haven't started it yet. I'd like to get her on the podcast. But when we do
Yeah.
our next Patreon recording, I'm going to share lots of things from that
Yes.
Scottish cookbook, and
Good,
I want to hear
because
lots
I
of
am
things from
so.
yours.
You mean when you do the next live, or when we record the next?
When we record the next private
Yeah.
podcast, I
Oh my
think.
gosh, that'll be
Yeah,
so good.
that would be nice.
I'm
So
excited.
I've got 2 reviews to read.
Let's hear him.
Talking about good things. So we have 2 wonderful reviews on Apple Podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts and you have the time and you love the podcast, please do leave us a review, because it helps other people find us, but also it makes us smile. That
Yeah,
I
it
think is the
does.
most
It
important
does.
thing. So we've got 2 here. Both of them are 5 stars. The first one is from the username No Party for Old Women. And her review is titled Yes, with 3 exclamation marks.
Oh, wow.
I'm so excited to have found this. This is something I've been looking for ages. After you've poured over Nourishing Traditions for years, what do you do then? You listen to this. Lots of encouragement and support.
I love
That's a
that.
lovely review.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then there's one other one by ESL Girl, who says, love this show. This show is so life-giving and encouraging, and these women really care. Keep up the good work. Smiley.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's left us a review. There are details of how to leave a review in the show notes if you are on Apple and you want to do that. We would love it in advance. Thank you.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
So,
All right.
right.
Shall we do
What are we
this?
talking about today then?
Well, I'm
Yeah,
very
go on.
excited about this episode, Allison, because this is something that you've kind of been discussing with me for months, that you wanted to do this episode. And then we started shaping up, the list, and we had to talk to all the patrons, and we talked to people around us. And so I'm very excited about this episode. So we're calling this one 20 Small Steps to an Ancestral Kitchen.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the reason that it first kind of bubbled up as something that we wanted to record is because that so many people seem overwhelmed. Just like that last review, so many people who talk to me say, well, I've got Nourishing Traditions and I read it, but I just I didn't know what to do, where to go first. I could help, and have said, the podcast is so encouraging around that. And so many people think, what do I have to do? I want to do this, but I don't have a schema in my head for how to do it. I don't know where to start. I want to do it all, but I know I can't do it all. And I want something that will just hold my hand and help me. And I think for both of us, it's been, both of our journeys have been small steps. If you try and do everything all at once, undoubtedly you fall over because you can't manage it all.
I think that's one. Oh, sorry.
No, go on,
okay.
You go.
I think that's one of the hazardous pitfalls, Allison, that, you and I were kind of insulated from in a way, because when we started reading these books, nobody was really talking about them. Or if they were, I just was oblivious to it, or it wasn't like in my face, like on Instagram and stuff. And if you have the slightest inkling towards ancestral food now, hop on Instagram and type in the hashtag, Weston A. Price or ancestral foods, and there's thousands and thousands of hits. And that just didn't exist when we started. But now that is a good thing. But where that becomes a hazard is when you start following these accounts. The people are like, if you don't eat soy-free chicken, you might as well just be dead. And if you're not eating sauerkraut every day, you might as well just give up. And, if you're not buying everything organic, why are you even here? And it's like, you start getting this impression that you need to be doing all of these things right now. And those accounts, while obviously they're well-meaning, they're people who've been doing this for years and years. And they've had time. Like, if you actually talk to them, they'll all say how they incrementally started. And you and I know, once you start understanding what soaking grains does, or what sauerkraut does, or then you're like, wow, that's what we're doing. I'm really passionate about this. But you had to have time to take in the information, literally change the structure of your day-to-day life to absorb the impact of that new activity. And that can take time. And I just feel like when I look on the internet, it doesn't really faze me, because I've had 15 years to like absorb this impact, but I can completely see why people say to me, I want to do this, but I'm overwhelmed.
Mm. I
And
think that
they just,
you're
it's
right.
because
I
they
mean,
feel like doing it all at once.
it shouldn't be like that.
No.
No lasting journey of change in any
Oh,
part of
no.
life
Mm.
is it is so rarely about just everything changed, that's it, and then it goes on like in the new way
Yeah.
successfully. It doesn't really work like that.
And if it does work like that,
Integrating stuff, like you said,
yes.
you've got to bring it into your body. You've got to understand it,
Yes.
and you've got to with it because this is so practical.
Mhm.
You've got to get that skill, and then,
Yeah.
like riding a bike, you've learned how to do it, and you can just get on a bike, and so you can focus on something else.
Yeah.
You've got to slowly take these steps, and so
Absolutely.
that's why I think we want to reassure people
Mhm.
that you don't, like you said, you don't have to do it all, even if it looks like other people have just did it all in a flash or make you feel like you've got to do it all.
Yeah.
You
You
can
will get to
just
the point.
take small steps.
You will get to the point where you're doing all, if not much of it. Like you will get there. If you're just
Yeah,
proceeding forward, you will get there. Um,
yeah, I agree.
but typically, like when you said, we don't change all in a flash or something, the only times that happens is with a
Mm.
highly traumatic precipitating event.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
maybe you hit rock bottom and you
Life-threatening
had
illness
an
or
amazing
something.
religious
Yeah,
conversion, or you were strung out on drugs and alcohol and you just
yeah,
got knocked straight. Like it's not easy to do it that way. And people will
yeah,
tell you that they go through trauma changing that. You got to get rid of all your friends in one day and get new
yeah,
friends and so
yeah,
so this is
yeah.
let's do this the gentle way and acknowledge that yes, there are multiple generations of missing training in between us and starting this. Like,
Mm.
did you know in America, in the US during the 70s and 80s, I believe up to 70% of women were formula feeding their babies?
Yeah, well, that was a big push, wasn't
I
it,
mean,
you know?
that's stunning. So then
Mm.
now we have multiple generations of people trying to reclaim the simple art of feeding your baby
Yeah.
with your
I
body.
think
And
I think that
that's
was probably the same in the UK as well. I mean,
I
I
believe it
was
was,
formula
yeah.
fed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So understanding that culture has left us kind of high and dry and
Mm.
generational wisdom, a lot of people, Sally Fallon says, eat the foods your grandma ate. Well, Sally can say that, but
Mm.
you can't tell that
Yeah.
to an 18-year-old because they're like, I don't know, my grandma goes to McDonald's and like, I, I,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's great,
Um,
great, great grandmother now.
yeah, yeah. It's more like you have to say, eat the foods that people born before 1940 were eating,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so let's do this, Allison. Let's do this
Yeah.
list.
Okay. So if people want to download the list and kind of follow it
Mhm.
along or put it, print it out and have it in their kitchen and their life afterwards, you can go to ancestralkitchen.com forward
Mhm.
slash 2020 small steps. So ancestralkitchen.com 20 small steps. You can download this because Andrea made it into a really beautiful PDF. So yeah, go on. Give us a start with
Let's go.
numbers 1 through to 5,
I think
Andrea.
this is our best work, Allison. It's your best. This is your
It's a
your brilliant.
masterpiece.
Yeah, no, really, really it is because simple things. Okay, and as we go, Allison, I've jotted down some podcast episode numbers. Um,
Mm.
because some of these refer back to we've done entire episodes about some of these topics. So I'll say
Yeah.
them as we go. All right, number one.
Yeah, please do.
And I should also say none of these go in any specific order. So the whole idea is you can start anywhere.
Yeah.
We had to put them in an order of some sort just to number them. Okay, number one, choose raw or low heat pasteurized milk.
Mhm.
And if you have downloaded the PDF, then you'll notice on page 2, if you look at number 1, I have another list of 20 things on page 2, and those are all books or resources that Allison or I or both of us relied on while we were progressing through this step. So
Mhm.
I'll only say the resource for this one. I won't say them for all, but just as an example,
Okay.
if you look on page 2, I referred you to number 1, which is a book called Untold Story of Milk: The History, Politics, and Science of Nature's Perfect Food, Raw Milk from Pasture-Fed Cows by Ron Schmid. That book is amazing. All those studies, Allison, that you and I have talked about, like the Framingham study and everything, they're in there. I mean,
Okay.
it's a stunning book. Okay, so that's number one.
I just want to say on that.
Yeah.
Someone said to me, also I saw someone commenting, saying, I've got a choice here. I could buy grass-fed pasteurized milk, or that's absolutely stamped organic, or non-stamped organic raw milk from a farm. Which should I choose? And in that question, I would say I would like to know where the raw milk comes from, more about the farm. So say I'd like to visit the farm. If I was happy with that, I would definitely choose the raw milk over the organic stamped pasteurized milk, because the conditions you need to keep your animals in order to have healthy raw milk are extremely high compared to pasteurization environments. And pasteurized milk is a completely different foodstuff to raw milk.
Yeah, I would probably end up going with the raw milk unstamped if it was me, because one thing I would look at is the pasteurized organic milk ultra heat treated, in which case it's actually going to degrade your bone structure in your body and cause more acidity and loss of calcium. It's actually going to do the reverse of what you want. But also, and you'll read all about that in that book, Untold Story of Milk. But also, odds are pretty good that the raw milk is a pastured cow. I mean, almost definitely.
Yeah.
So she's probably getting non-organic grain during milking. I don't know. Or it's just not certified. The field could have been used for something else before and it's not 12 years past, or, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things. Or they just didn't want to pay $3,000 for a piece of paper that said they can use a government stamp.
Exactly.
A lot of us don't want to do that. And we just keep playing whack-a-mole and changing the names. It's regenerative or whatever. So and also,
okay, sorry, that was my
on this one, I'll just say, don't be alarmed if they don't want you to come out to the farm. Don't be alarmed, because raw milk is very touchy from a government standpoint. And and it can be like, you might need to earn the farmer's trust to deserve to be able to come out to their farm in a weird way.
I think I've always done that with my farmers. That's why they've been happy for me to come and visit them, because I've known them and talked to them and they got to know me.
Usually you can. But raw milk is one of those things where sometimes farmers are just so gun shy and nervous that you're, undercover or somebody, whatever, that they might not just be like, yeah, come on out. They might be. Might be.
What a world.
So, this is the world we live in. Okay, number 2. Include fermented vegetables in your meals. This is a good one. And you guys will notice that these are really broad statements. We're not saying like, have kimchi at breakfast, just everybody likes different things. So refer to number 48, our interview with Kristen Shockey. Really, really amazing interview. And if you check the resources, we've got an amazing resource from her listed there. And then also on our podcast, also number 5, what we're fermenting right now. That was a good episode, just talking about what was going on in our kitchens.
Yeah, great.
All right. Number 3, choose traditional fats over vegetable or seed oils. You have
I think
lots of choices here.
I wanted to say that I asked the patrons where they kind of started, and Rebecca, who's in Australia, said this is where she started.
Oh, yeah.
And she switched from vegetable oil to olive oil, ghee, lard, and tallow. And that kind of mushroomed into lots of other of these steps coming to life in her kitchen. And I think it's a place where if people do understand and start to learn about the problems with vegetable oil, they immediately think, oh, I could just get this out of my kitchen and look for other fats. And so, that's where Rebecca started.
I love Rebecca. She's hilarious. We send lots of voice memos back and forth on Instagram. She's so funny.
She said in her comment, that went on to other things, but she now said she gets virtually all of her food from farmers and only goes to
That's
the
great.
supermarket once a month. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Well, once
Yes.
you start on one thing and you start getting to a certain point, you start realizing, it's a logical step because you say, well, I want to use traditional fats. So where do I get lard? So you're like, I just go to the store. So you find a nice little, 16-ounce jar of pastured lard and you're like, this is great. You start using it. And then the farther down the road you go and you're like, oh, I'm buying pastured pork. And then the farmer you're buying the pork, it's expensive. So you start buying a half a pig at a time. And then the farmer's like, hey,
Mm,
you want some lard? Because I have a lot here and nobody else. And you're like, yeah.
mm,
So you just sort of ooze into the lifestyle because one thing after another kind of you realize everything I'm eating is a farm direct food. I might as well just go straight to the source.
yeah.
And Joel
Yeah.
Salatin says, if anybody's listened to the Joe Rogan Experience, I just recently started listening to the Joel Salatin interviews on there. They're so unbelievably good, Allison. Listening to Joel Salatin talk is always
Mm,
just a treat. But um, he said specifically the way to do this is to get skills in the kitchen and to buy directly from farms.
mm.
Listen to episode number 33, The Fats We Love, The Fats We Leave. And we talk about the kind of hidden history of Crisco there. All right, number 4,
Mm.
soak your grains.
Hmm.
And you can
This is
listen
a place
to,
where a
yeah,
lot of people start, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, go on. You're going to point to another podcast.
Yep,
God, we've
episode
done some
number,
podcasts, haven't we?
I know, we did a lot. Episode number 19 is called All About Grains, Preparing, Processing, and Digesting.
Mm,
So that's a
great.
great episode.
Kelsey, another of our patrons, said she started there. I think that's a
Oh,
kind of an
yeah.
easy one because you don't have
Yeah.
to do much. You can just
Yeah.
literally, you could get your oats that you
Hmm.
want for breakfast,
Hmm.
and before you go to bed, put a little bit of something acidic with them, some water,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that's it. It takes like 3 minutes.
This
So,
is like the
yeah,
cheapest and easiest place to start because a lot of people
yeah.
who want to do ancestral cooking are already baking to some degree. And all you got to do is
Mm,
add 12 hours, you know?
yeah,
All right, number
yeah.
5, well, which I didn't do last night, but all right. Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye. Number 5, choose heritage or heirloom grains, especially those from local mills. And you can listen to episode number 42, How to Get and Grind the Best Flour for Bread. That was a really
Mm,
fun episode. Was that the one
yeah.
where I
Ellie's
couldn't stay
always,
on for the after show because I was falling asleep?
yeah.
Yeah, you and
No,
Ellie
that was
had to
wonderful. We
record it
actually
without me.
watched Ellie grind some grains and
That was
make
really
bread.
good.
That was really wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take number 6 to
you go.
number 10. So number 6 is kind of related to number 5. Choose sourdough breads. And not always can we make breads, depending on where you're at with your process and how much time you have. It's not necessarily easy for everyone to do that, and not everyone's a bread maker. Some other people,
Yeah.
some people actually prefer making fermented vegetables, and that's where their joy is. So
Mhm.
fair enough. But where you can, choose sourdough breads. And we have an early podcast episode about sourdough. What number's that, Andrea? Do you
Well,
have the
I
list there?
actually marked down 3 here because
Oh,
we like
wow.
bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know we've talked about it and lots of other ones too. Number 41 is Rye
Mm.
Sourdough Bread, Mastering the
Yeah.
Basics. That's a
Yeah.
great
Okay.
episode and also refers you to Allison's workshop, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to say this unbiased right now, probably the best rye sourdough workshop like on the internet that you can find.
Thank you.
So refer you to that. And number 10, Ellie from Ellie's Everyday Sourdough
Yeah.
Baking.
Yeah.
Ellie's truly a master and she makes it simple. And then number 7, Sourdough,
I
Why
remember
We
that
Love
one.
It. And we kind of talked about the
Yeah.
history of bread there, which was
Yeah.
disgusting and interesting.
The history and the health, I remember being in there, and
Yeah.
so if you want to know more about why sourdough is so good for you compared
Mhm.
to fluffed up packet breads in
Don't
supermarkets,
get
then go back
Allison
to that
going.
very early episode. Yeah, don't get me started. We've got to get through all 20 of these. Okay. Number 7, eat nose to tail, using all of the animal, including the organ meat.
Mhm.
Both of us feel really strongly about this, and Andrea is doing that with her, her own animals there and
Mhm.
animals that she's butchering. For me, because I'm buying from my farmer, and I don't buy whole or half animals because I don't have the space for them.
Mhm.
I'm literally just buying the organ meat. So I'm buying liver, I'm buying heart, I'm buying spleen, I'm buying all
Yeah.
the kind of the bits,
Mhm.
and they're so economical. So,
Yes,
if you're
they
worried about
are.
finances, you want to move forward ancestrally, but you're worried about finances, we'll swap out some of your standard muscle meat for some organ meat, because not only will you be getting far more nutrients because they're the most nutrient dense part of an animal, but you will also be saving some money.
Yeah.
Really will be.
Yeah, get a heart.
So,
It's just a
yeah,
muscle. So if anybody's like, where to begin, get a
exactly.
heart. It's a muscle. Same
Yeah.
as all the other muscle
Put it
meat
in
you
the slow
buy.
cooker.
It's just
Exactly.
Valentine
There
shaped.
is There is a recipe on my website for how to slow cook a heart. It's
Oh
really
yeah.
simple. You just put it in the slow cooker, put water in, put some
Yeah.
bits in
I
like
did it.
carrot and cook
It
it overnight. Yeah,
I've done that.
easiest
Your
pie
recipe, it's really good. And
and
and it's,
delicious.
like you said, very economical because not many other people are buying them. So,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, number 8, make drinking home fermented beverages a habit.
mm,
We've
that's
talked on
hard.
many podcasts about how modern beverages just really aren't drinks. And this is another sign of kind of habit one, like riding a bicycle. Once you've learned how to make water kefir, it's difficult perhaps at the beginning to get the grains, work it out, figure out what jars to use to make it fizzy, how long do you need to leave it. But after that, it just becomes second nature after you've done it for a
Yep.
week, 2 weeks. Now in my home, Gabriel makes the kefir, literally. It's
I love
been
that.
turned over to him, so he has to do it on a tray just in case he spills some. But he does the kefir now, and that's how easy it is. My 8-year-old can do it. It's just getting into the habit first, and then of course there's so much more than water kefir. There's kombucha, there's
Yeah.
my boza that I make. There's tons of different fermented
All kinds of
beverages,
brews. The root
and
beer.
and they're great for kids. The
Mhm.
fizziness, the fun. They're just yeah.
Yeah.
Again, don't get me started on that one.
And
So
with
anyway, I'll stop.
it is why you said make home fermented beverages a habit
Mm,
because or make drinking them because it does need to become a habit because you can't just be like, "Oh, today I'm going to have kombucha."
yeah,
Oh, no, 14
yeah.
days out. And I go in waves where sometimes I'm making kombucha, sometimes I'm not, sometimes, but there's always something fermented of some sort that you can drink.
Mm,
And a good way to think of some of these habits that you're developing, Joel Salatin describes farm work this way, and this is the same way Gary and I have described it on our calendars. There's chores, which is the thing you repeat every day, and it just maintains your
mm,
status quo, doesn't really
mm.
produce anything new. And then there's projects. That's like sitting down and taking the Christian
Yeah,
Shockey workshop or taking Allison's Rye
yeah.
workshop or something. That's a
Mm.
project, different thing. You're learning something new. But the repetitive things, feeding the birds, putting water in the waterers, refilling your kefir, that's just a chore, a habit, daily thing.
Yeah, yeah, completely. Um, Okay, number 9. So important.
Yeah.
Find and support local farmers who farm regeneratively. We thought
Yes.
about kind of what word to use here because, like you alluded to earlier in the episode, there's tag words and words that go into fashion and not. But basically, someone who cares for the soil and cares for the animals and who is in your local environment, your local economy.
Yeah.
I know that not everyone has a farmer very, very close to them. And so, there are possibilities that you can go find someone who's a bit further and join with some other people around you and do a big haul and get stuff in like that. Kathy, who is another one of our patrons, who I think listeners will hear about her lovely course in this episode.
Yeah.
She said she started here and she read a book called Coming Home to Eat.
Oh, I
And
love
she
it.
said basically everything else just came from that.
Yeah.
And it feels like a fundamental to what we're saying is an ancestral kitchen, because an ancestral kitchen was local and was supplied by produce that had to be grown in a way that the soil would be able to grow the produce next year and the year after and the year after. They had to be looked after. And so that one is a wonderful thing all round, I think.
Yeah. And some hallmarks of a regenerative farm could include, but are, don't necessarily have to be, there may be diverse produce off the farm. So they're rotating chickens, cows, and pigs, or they have some veg and they're, moving chickens to clean pastures and gardens and things like that. Not always though. Sometimes a vegetable farm is just a vegetable farm, and they, like the one we worked on in Virginia, they co-opted with a local horse barn, and they would get manure delivered every month. And then they just had a huge long compost row and a compost turner, and they would just make compost, But diversity is often a sign of a regenerative farm, even if they're not selling all of it. Like they might grow vegetables and not sell them, but they have chickens and things like that. So, and often the farmer, if you're meeting them somewhere where, like, you're not standing in the field where they're trying to get work done, but you're maybe talking at a farmer's market or something, um, they want to talk about it because this is their vocation. It's not they're very passionate about it. Typically, you have to be pretty passionate to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and trudge out into the snow and move cows, and so they'll share with you. And I would just say, listen to anything. I don't care what it is. Listen to anything Joel Salatin talks about. And you can talk about the shape of a spoon, and I'd be like, wow, I learned something. But he teaches a lot of things that you want to look for just if you listen to him talk. So
thank you. So number 10, switch to pasture-raised eggs. Look for soy-free fed chickens. So Andrea, this is your kind of corner. Do you want to talk a bit about soy-free fed chickens?
Yeah. Again, look, you can go to episode number 30, The Whole Chicken and Nothing But the Chicken.
Yeah.
Where we talk about chickens. And there is either an after show or a KTC or both, Allison, where you and I talked more in depth on the Patron podcast about that.
Yeah, I remember.
And about birds. Yeah. And it's not always easy to find soy-free fed chickens, so don't make it the hill you die on necessarily. But do look for them, because the more people who look for them, and just testifying from both the customer and the farmer perspective, the more people who look for them, the more will be on the market. And that's, just basic economics, right? And a soy-free chicken is probably still getting some form of legume. She might be getting peas or something. So you're not going to avoid legumes altogether, but you will end up with presumably more digestible ones. And soy-free chickens will usually also be corn-free as well. Not always, but often. And because if you buy a soy-free feed, it's usually soy and corn-free, because what we're trying to avoid is the high levels of polyunsaturated fatty acids that the birds are consuming.
Yeah.
So you end up with a meat from a soy-free bird that is higher in saturated fat and has a normal, what you would see out, you know, as if we would see birds this big in the wild, but um, a normal bird's saturated fat ratio, which is what your body wants,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
less less likely to spoil and things like that in terms of the fat's not going rancid in your body. So um, the soy-free and corn-free chickens also being higher in saturated fat are insanely juicy and tender. And Gary's parents actually bought 3 turkey from us, and his mom told me on Christmas, she said, "We roasted the turkey for Christmas," and
Mm-hmm.
it was just them at their house or whatever, and she said, or it was before Christmas, they roasted it, and she said, "It was so good." She said, "We could not stop eating it." She said, "It was hands down the best bird I've ever eaten."
Wow.
And she doesn't typically love chicken and turkey and things like that. Um,
Gosh.
so that was pretty
That's
exciting to
wonderful.
hear. And
Yeah.
she said, I said, "Well, when you do a whole turkey, you can, because it's just the 2 of them at the house." And I said, "You could shred up the meat and freeze it or whatever." She goes, "Oh no, we didn't need to shred any meat up." She goes, "We pretty
It
much ate
went.
it all right out of the fridge.
Yeah.
We didn't have it. They just kept eating it. It's like I didn't even want to put it in anything." So that was fun. Yes.
Gosh. Yum.
Okay. Did that
Okay.
answer your question? I don't
Yeah, no,
remember.
it did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. 11 to 15. Eat grass fed. Number 11. Eat grass fed beef, pastured pork, and pastured chicken. And you can refer to episode number 36, where we actually interviewed Nicolette Hahn Nyman, who is the author of Defending Beef. And that book is listed also for number 11 in the resources list. 1010, recommend that
Mm-hmm.
book. You too, Allison?
Yeah, completely. I devoured that book. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
We have that book and as many of the books as we could from your resources
Mhm.
list in our bookstore that we have. So if
Yep.
you're looking to buy books and you can't get to your local bookstore and you want a non-Amazon way of buying
Mhm.
books, then check out the link in the show notes because it will take you to a bookstore that is virtual and will post you the books, but also supports local bookstores
Yeah.
and gives a lot of its money to local bookstores. So you can
Super
find
important to do that.
lots of books we love in there.
Yeah. So listen to that episode and you will understand more, but reading the book will just it
Blow your
it
mind.
will blow your
Mm.
mind because you will suddenly see that every single thing you're seeing in the news about beef is honestly a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
lie. And it's frustrating because people, in order to explain it, people just want like a snap
Yeah.
phrase, but you need to understand so much more about carbon sequestration and mycelium growth and water retention and soil tilth and
It's
things like
so
that.
deep and
Hmm.
so amazing that there's no
Yeah.
way you can explain it in a pithy sentence.
Yeah.
But Nicolette does a wonderful job
I
at
can
diving
summarize the
into
book for you.
the
I can
numerous
summarize the book for
ways. Go on
you.
then. Go on then. It's a challenge.
Beef is
Summarize it.
beef is the most regenerative food on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's a complete closed cycle. It's a complete closed loop in itself. They drop the fertilization that grows the grass that they eat. I mean,
Mm.
you can't really get a more closed loop than that.
Yeah, exactly. And there are parts and so many tracks of this planet that we live
Yep.
on that really can provide nothing else for us than beautiful grass-fed beef.
Yep.
If we
Yeah.
try to make them provide other things and we have to put inputs
Extractive
in them,
things. Yeah.
we ruin
Yeah.
the territory. And yet
Mhm.
cows can go on there
And for somebody who's
and
got the question about water, the
yeah,
if somebody says yes, but beef drink water, so then, or beeves drink water, then what's the question there, or what's the answer there? Then you would just say that honestly, the more people say things against beef, the more you're like, you're really showing your lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Because as they're dropping the manure and using their heavy hooves to press grass seed and roots, and then cropping the grass just to the right height, that it does its most regenerative work on the soil,
Mm.
they're also increasing soil's water retention and
Yeah.
bringing in a hospitable environment for a massively diverse population, including creatures that will help build ponds.
Yeah,
So,
completely.
yeah,
And
pretty
I
fascinating.
think that the whole thing that the whole world seems to think that it's
Mhm.
more environmentally friendly if you're going to eat meat to eat pork or chicken. You know, if you listen to any regenerative person or anyone like Chris Kresser or anyone who's working in this field, listen to Nicolette, read Nicolette's book, you
Yeah,
understand that it's the other way around.
it
You
is.
know that
It's kind of suspicious, isn't it?
yeah, completely. And you know the interview that I did with Patrick Holden and the roadmap he's kind of laid out for how the UK could be self-sufficient in its staples, it's really clear in that the amount of pork and chicken that people in the
Mhm.
UK eat needs to go down. But the UK can sustain quite a large amount of grass-fed cattle because it
Yeah,
has the right territory for it, you know?
yeah.
Mm.
Um, Also, if people want another resource, jot this down. The fall 2022 edition of the Weston A. Price Journal has a brief article in the back where Joel Salatin did a recent debate with Peter Singer, who's been, an anti-meat um, broadcaster since the 70s when he wrote his book. I can't remember the name. Anyways, um, and Joel Salatin actually, he doesn't put the entire debate in there, but he says, "Here, I'll show you like the 12 arguments that I had prepared for the
Yeah, okay.
resolution." So it's very useful if you're like, I don't have time to read Defending Beef. Okay, at least read that.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
each one of those is basically a chapter in Defending Beef if you want more detail. Okay,
Hmm.
number 12, ferment your dairy into yogurt, cheese, or kefir. We put that
Hmm.
because when you say fermented dairy, I get lots of green faces and people go, "Bleh." And then I'm like, well, have you ever had like yogurt? And they're like,
Cheese?
oh, okay. So yogurt, cheese, kefir, or the byproducts, whey, kefir whey, um, labna, kefir cheese, things like that.
Bland.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, lots of different things.
Yeah. Schmirkes, clabbered
Mm.
milk. There's tons of ways to ferment dairy. It
Yeah.
makes it more digestible. And if you have issues with dairy, first of all, switching to raw is always helpful, but starting with only fermented in very, very, very small doses, like a tablespoon a
Hmm.
day. And then at least over the course of the week, like I drink a fair amount of cream or milk that's not been fermented, but over
Hmm.
the course of the week, I get multiple doses of fermented dairy. That's enough to keep the activity in my gut that I need to digest even the unfermented milk. And
Mm.
that's something that's been proven by studies. So it's not like I'm just making
Yeah.
that up. All right. Number 13, Allison, please speak to this one.
Mm.
Yeah, number 13,
Okay.
eat fat fearlessly. And I'll
Yeah.
refer them one more time to number 33, the fats we love, the fats we leave.
Yeah, completely. This one I wanted to put in big letters and like plaster over everything because I didn't eat fat because I was terrified of it for very many years. And I think there are tons of people who are of our era who are like that, you know, who think that saturated fat is the devil and they're going to get high cholesterol and they're
Yeah.
going to get fat and
Whoops.
just it was an incredible journey for me to go from being terrified of fat because I was overweight my entire childhood, which,
Right.
you know, had huge effects on my psyche,
Hmm.
to going from raw vegan and then trying to bring animal saturated fat back into my diet. And the fear that I was faced with was immense.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not saying just eat fat all the time, you know, eat tons, you know, pints and pints and pints of fat. But what we are saying is don't be scared when you do eat it. Don't be
Mm-hmm.
scared to put it on your bread, like I put lard all over my sourdough. Don't be scared to cook with it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
be scared to put it on your vegetables as a dressing. Don't be scared of fat. It is not the thing that will make you fat in and of itself, and it is not something that inherently leads to high cholesterol. We need fat. Our body needs fat. Our brain needs fat. And it is just feels like the biggest diet lie of our era.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, eat fat fearlessly. Phew.
Yeah. Confidently go forward.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I think in number 33, we talk about, Allison, your experience when you were trying to convince yourself to eat cheese that had fat in it. So that was a
Yeah.
good episode for people to listen to, especially if you're
Hmm.
coming out of like the traumatic 90s
Yeah.
where nobody was supposed to eat fat. All right. Love it. You're reading the next couple ones, right? Where are we? I lost track.
We're up to 14. You've still
Okay.
got 14 and 15, yeah?
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Okay, it's me. I can't count. All right. Excuse me. I got so caught up in the story. Okay. And number 14, include bone broth in your diet. And you can listen to episode number 26, Bones and Water, the Magic of Stock, if you want to hear us wax eloquent on this favorite protein-rich beverage.
Hmm. Yeah. Just wonderful. A
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful,
And
wonderful
connecting
drink.
it.
And
Mhm. Connecting
go
it
on.
to
You
number
still.
7, the eat nose to tail one.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
would fall under nose to tail eating. And also,
That's true.
um, worth noting that before, when Gary and I started eating ancestral foods, we made the slow ooze into it, and
Mm.
the meat, you know, is more expensive. It can sometimes cost twice as much when it's not coming from a force-fed factory, farm. Um, Trust me, the regenerative meat, if people actually had to pay the full expense, regenerative meat would literally cost half of what
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
regenerative meat at the price it is today would cost half or less than half of what factory farmed meat costs. Um,
Yeah.
but all the expenses are offloaded, and we pay in this country over $40 billion a year in taxes to subsidize the grains that are fed to those animals. But
Mm.
we would buy a lot of bones because they were cheaper
Yeah.
and we could make protein broth out of them, basically. And so we got a lot of our protein and obviously amino acids, um, and meat benefits from just broth because that's just what we had. Um,
Mm.
and now we do have a lot more meat interspersed, and we're also raising our own meat as well.
Mm.
But that took many years of steps. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point, that's the point of these steps, that
yeah,
these things don't all happen like one week and then the
no,
next week and the next week. They take many years.
yeah,
And like you said, this is another great step for economy. If you want
mhm,
to move ancestrally, but you don't have the money, you can get bones for next to nothing. Sometimes farmers will give you them for nothing.
yep.
And if you don't like drinking it,
Mhm.
I use
What's wrong with you? Oh,
I
sorry.
use my
What?
I use bone broth in my house. I actually cook more with bone broth than I drink it. So
Yeah, me too.
whenever I cook straight grains, often we cook millet and sorghum, the kind of lighter grains, and we cook them in bone broth all the time. And all of the stews and soups and things that I make, I will put bone broth in. If I have anything that I'm kind of cooking that's a bit dry, I'll get the bone broth out the fridge and put a bit of bone broth in it to
Mhm.
kind of loosen it up.
Oh
I'll
yeah,
make my
absolutely.
gravy using bone broth if I haven't
Mhm.
got any stock juices. You
Yep.
don't necessarily have to just sit there with a cup of bone broth if you don't want to. You just
Yeah,
use it in your cooking.
yeah. But you could if you wanted to.
Yeah,
Just sit
you
there with
could
a
if you
cup
want to.
of
You could make hot chocolate with it like you do.
Yeah, make hot chocolate with it, or like literally my favorite breakfast is bone broth heated on the stove. Use the same pan every time, so I know exactly how much I put in it, what fits in my bowl,
Mm.
and then as it gets to a simmer, I crack in 1 or 2 eggs and let them poach in it. I sprinkle in salt, and I'll put in, then after I take it off the heat, 1 drop of whatever oil I'm in the mood for. So maybe oregano, maybe thyme, maybe sage, and then poured in a bowl, and I mean, I could nurse that baby for an hour.
So this
So good.
morning, this is another good example. These are great practical examples. I had some bone broth, which was in a little saucepan. I put some previously cooked sorghum in there, and I warmed that
Oh,
up. I put some slices of spring onion and some very thin slices of carrot. I warmed that up. Then I took a spoonful of miso and stirred it in, so it was all kind of salty. Then I cracked an egg in it, put the lid on, cooked it
ah,
until the egg was not so jiggly, just starting to
yeah.
set, and that was my breakfast. So
Ah,
that was my bone
I love
broth,
it.
part of my bone broth for the day.
Yep. I think
It's easy.
people need to remember that, and we've talked about this multiple times, and people say to me all the time, I'm glad you said that, because we're not all out here making kidney souffle, you know.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of the food, I would say the majority of the food we eat is quite simple, like 8-year-old level cooking. Not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it is very simple or repetitive steps that can be learned and taught, even if it does take time, like the skills. Um, but they're not these just insane, over the top,
yeah,
complicated things, because ain't nobody got time for that. And we're already
yeah.
sucking a lot of time into our um, food habits. So, all right,
Completely.
number 15. This episode of Ancestral Kitchen is brought to you by Homefolk Roots. Homefolk Roots is an online membership community dedicated to living a simple life that is in harmony with the seasons. This group is created by one of our listeners, Kathy. Members take on gentle challenges complete with ebooks and printables to help stay focused on home and nature. You'll connect in a private forum and have the opportunity to participate in old-fashioned mail swaps and letter writing. Once a month, you can get together for a live chat. At Homefolk Roots, you'll grow food, cook from scratch, use herbs for healing, take walks in nature, forage, craft, connect with your local communities, and share adventures in a judgment-free zone. You'll share photos, struggles, and successes to celebrate and encourage each other in an authentic, slow life connected to the earth. Join in spring and take 15% off the season's membership by visiting homespunseasonalliving.com/AKP. That's homespunseasonalliving.com/AKP, or check the show notes. This is the one I started on. So this is where my
Uh-huh.
journey began back in probably 2009, I think. Buy untreated vegetables, fruit, and greens. We chose the word untreated because, again, organic has been a co-opted label by the government, and you might not find certified organic food. And we now use the word organic no longer means, organic, it just means
Yeah,
certified. So, food that has been untreated. There you go. Pretty
yeah,
simple.
completely.
All right, Allison, you want to pick up the
Okay,
rest?
5 left. We're on the last 5. Okay, number 16 is where I started. So we're very close to each other. Read about ancestral foods or listen to podcasts. So the way that I was introduced to ancestral foods is that a dear friend who I knew in Italy told me about Nourishing Traditions. And
Wow.
I saw the book and I was just like, I have to get that book. And so I got the book and I just devoured the whole book. All the
Wow.
side notes, I went straight back to the bibliography at the back, of course,
Of
and read all
course.
about the other books.
We're
And that
footnote
was where my
chasers.
journey started. And then, it's like so many of the patrons have said when they talked about this, it kind of just mushroomed from there. So I
Mhm.
read the sauerkraut recipe and I started making sauerkraut.
Yeah.
And then I found a farm that sold raw milk and I bought some raw milk from them. And then I found out about kefir grains and I got some of those and I put them in that raw milk that I just bought.
Yeah.
And that's really what that kick-started the whole thing around
Yeah.
the same time as you, 2009, I
Yeah.
think.
That's so funny.
So it is wonderful to read about ancestral foods when you go to something like Sally Fallon's book. It's inspiring and it really inspired me to get going. I know so many people have been inspired by Nourishing Traditions.
Mhm.
And then, of course, now we have podcasts and we have, as Andrew has been spattering through the episode, we
Mhm.
have a ton of episodes to listen to, which will give you information, support you, encourage you, and send you off on whatever tangent you particularly want to go off on.
Yeah.
So that was my beginning reading.
Yep.
And thank you to all the people, who have created that material that is available for us now to,
Yeah.
to read and to listen to. I don't know if there were podcasts back in 2009, but thankfully there were books. So
There
thank you,
were
Sally Fallon, for
podcasts. I know
writing
because I
Nourishing
was actually
Traditions. Were there?
listening to an Italian one like in 2005.
Ah, okay. I
So
don't
they
remember back
existed.
that far.
Yeah.
Okay, number 17,
Oh, hold on.
start a garden.
I was going to
sorry.
sorry. I didn't want
Yeah,
to cut you
go.
off, but I had a couple podcast episodes to list there.
Ah, yeah,
So for
please do.
reading about ancestral foods, you could look to number 3, Why We Cook Ancestrally. That's a good place to
Yeah.
go. Number 6, which is called 6 Books We Love, where Allison and
Yeah.
I share 6 different books that are all really great resources that we heavily lean on. Number 11, Nourishing Traditions, the Ancestral Cookbook. That is one of our most popular episodes. And number 22, Book Stacks for the New Year, where we each shared the list of what we were reading. And all of those books are great resources. And I think they might be all listed in the show notes. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they are.
Let's see. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, they are listed. Yep. So you can actually jump to each timestamp and listen to the section specifically about that book. Pastured Poultry Profits, Beekeeping for Beginners, Animals Make Us Human. There's a lot of books listed in there. So, all right. Sorry, Allison. Back to number 17.
Okay, number 17 is start a garden. And I know that a lot of people start here. Angie, who you were talking about earlier, another one of our patrons, started there, and she said, from there she was thinking about, well, how can I preserve the produce that I'm making in my garden? So that was kind of how she then moved into other steps.
Yeah.
I have a very small garden, which is paved, and mine is container. Andrew has a lot more space than me, but you can start a garden on your balcony, or you can start a huge garden, and it's a wonderful way to get close to your food and begin to understand how things work. And I've learned so much since we've been in this place. So it's only like 3 years, and I've had my container garden. It's the first time, seriously, I've grown any vegetables. And I've learned about how vegetables work. I didn't understand that before. I've learned so much about soil. I've taught myself everything about bokashi, and now I'm making my own compost using bokashi in there. And it's just so wonderful to bring your own produce into your own kitchen and eat it.
It really is.
So, yeah, that's a great one.
People can listen to episode number 45, which is called Fermenting Trash in the Kitchen. And Allison, you just kind of alluded to it when you said bokashi. So we'll explain in that episode what is bokashi and how does it work and why is it good for your garden, what Joel Salatin calls pot gardens.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Number 18, include herbs in your food and drink.
Herbs.
That's something that I love to do. Herbs, yeah, not herbs. You can include herbs, and I'll include herbs out of that.
Why do we say that? I don't know. Doesn't make sense. If it's a name, we say the H. Like we say herb.
Do you?
If it's a name. Like, hey, Herb, how you doing? Yeah.
Okay.
We don't say, hey, Herb.
I don't know. Someone should look that up on Google for us.
Yeah, please help us.
Not Google. Some other browser, not Google. Anyway, include herbs in your food and drink. So herbs are not just wonderful flavour, some ingredients. They are also full of essential oils and beautiful health-giving things. And they can change a simple meal. Now, you were talking about cooking simply. Cooking like an 8-year-old can. Well, you can cook like an 8-year-old and then just add a different herb each day, and you've got a different dish each day.
Bam.
And we've talked about putting herbs in bone broth. I know we've done several patron interviews on the private podcast. I know we did one with Stephanie, who's a patron, who's also a herbalist.
That would be a good one.
And Ira, and both of them talk about using herbs in your food and drink. It's just a wonderful thing to do. Okay, number 19, remove chemical-based toiletries from your home.
Big step.
This is a huge thing, and I think makes a huge difference to health. It was something that I did before I started eating ancestrally. When I got to Nourishing Traditions, the cookbook, I'd already done this.
Oh, so
And
maybe this was step one for you.
yeah, well, I kind of wasn't ancestral because I was raw vegan then, so I don't know if it kind of counts.
Yeah,
Perhaps it was step one.
That's part of the
It
journey.
counts. Yeah, well, it was completely. You're right. So yeah, and our life is so much better and so much cheaper through not buying bottles and sprays and things with awful ingredients in that get absorbed by our skin and we cannot detox them. It's just so much simpler to have very simple soap.
Yeah.
And not use 17 different things for each different kind of deployment of a cleansing agent. That one seems like a no-brainer, really, for me. And number 20, our last one of our 20 small steps to an ancestral kitchen, is along the same lines, which is choose reusable and non-toxic household cleaning supplies. So by reusable, we mean, rather than paper towels, you could have an old shirt that you cut up and use, and then you're washing it each time. And household cleaning, rather than having the same bottles of spray with all these ingredients in as you've got in your shower to clean your kitchen surface, instead choose a non-toxic version. You can find online tons of recipes for simple cleaners with vinegar and lemon and essential oils. And that just means, when you go to your chopping board, when you go to your table, your food and your utensils and your hands are not going to be touching all those chemicals.
Yeah.
And then, you eat the food. So it kind of makes the circle and keeps your kitchen in a way that for thousands of years our ancestors would have had. They would have not been using all these things with 7 syllables in names and to clean their kitchens,
Yeah.
They didn't. And so
There's a number of episodes in the Patreon feed that people could listen to. Obviously, the ones talking about herbalism would be even helpful here. Then I know you and I addressed the question when people ask, what do we use to clean our face? We addressed that in a Patreon episode. And um, we talked about like the history a little bit of chemical usage in the home. That was a really good episode.
That was great.
But those are, I think, are all on the Patreon feed. On the main feed,
and also there's an interview with Ellie on how to make soap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
In the Patreon feed.
We did is that one on the main feed or on the? No,
it's on the Patreon feed.
Yeah, so on the Patreon feed, we talked to Ellie because Ellie's Everyday is her sourdough channel, and Ellie's soap making is her soap channel. So you can find those both on YouTube, and then the interviews with her on the Patreon feed, the bonus podcast. And also on the main feed, you can look at number 37. Doesn't necessarily directly address this, but it indirectly does. It's called A Peek into Allison and Rob's Ancestral Lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one, actually. You just want to get to know Allison and Rob. So, yeah.
Thank you. Wow. So those are our 20 steps. And we're only just over an hour talking about them. Amazing. I didn't know if we'd get them in before the sun went down over here.
Look at how good we are.
So as we said, this has been made into a PDF. So you can go to ancestralkitchen.com/20 small steps and download it, plus the resources list that Andrea made, which will show you the books and other resources that we've talked about through the episode. And I really do hope it helps, wherever you are, whether you're just starting with this or whether you've been doing it for 10 years, it's really a useful thing to understand that these are, parts of an ancestral kitchen and that we took them step by step and it took us time to bring these into our lives. And they're there to say, well, which one do you feel most drawn to? If you feel like starting a garden because that feels exciting to you, then you can go and start a garden. But if you want to start making sourdough bread, then that's more your style. There are many, many ways to get into this and many, many ways to move forward. And doing it calmly without pressure is by far the most sane and long-standing way of doing it. So If you want to share with us where you're at or what you're hoping to move on to, what you're starting with, what you did start with, feel free to contact us. We're both on Instagram, and the details are all in the show notes, and you can get in contact with us.
Yeah, it
That
would be
way.
interesting to hear people say where they started, because I think,
Yeah.
especially if somebody's been doing this for a number of years and they go through kind of like you just did when you were saying, oh, well, I read Nourishing Traditions, then I started making sauerkraut, then I found a farm with raw milk, then I learned about milk kefir. Like
Yeah.
tracking the journey, you can see where each one, that is the thing about ancestral food, is that each one links up to another one.
Yeah.
You can rearrange them in different orders, but they tend to have you'll see this progression in your life where I think you'll jump through a couple, you'll almost, do 2 or 3 kind of changes happen even in a day. Like, well, I started buying lard from a farmer and I started eating fat. That just happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you might cluster some of these leaps, and then you might say, yeah, I've been eating nose to tail and growing my own vegetables and eating fat fearlessly for 4 years, and I'm now going to make sourdough bread. It
Yeah.
might take a long time to get to some of the steps, but that's we have time. We have time to make
Yeah.
these changes.
I agree. Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea.
All right, Allison. Until next time.
Yeah. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth, and Alison's at Ancestral_Kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.